What do you do when the patriarchy pushes you out of the boardroom? If you're Cheyenne Richards, you write a novel, get your captain's license, and sail off into a badass second act. Cheyenne is a former tech exec and my beloved former boss, turned award-winning author and ocean adventurer. And she is living proof that midlife reinvention isn't just possible, it might be the best thing that ever happens to you. We talk creative courage, imposter syndrome, and why living your authentic life is the ultimate power move. Prepare to be inspired by one of my favorite mentors. Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Belong Wellness Podcast. I am your host, Jessica Long. I am a health coach specializing in perimenopause, a longtime fitness instructor, mama of two littles, and a wife. If you are a midlife woman wondering what the actual F is going on with your hormones, your emotions, your relationships, your career, and your life in general, then you belong here. Join me each week as I share my own personal stories of how I navigate this wild stage of life. I also bring in experts and fellow badass midlifers to share their incredible stories of career pivots, managing relationships, parenting, living a healthy lifestyle, and much more. So listen, if midlife has you feeling like you're just not yourself anymore and alone in the chaos, this podcast is for you. Grab your giant water bottle, snap on your weighted vest, and let's get to it. Cheyenne, what an incredible story you have of building an incredibly successful career as a corporate marketer and then taking a 180-degree turn and following a completely different path. You were such an influential boss and mentor to me, and it has been a true delight to watch you evolve and blossom. And I'm so happy that my listeners get to meet you today. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. That is really meaningful, especially coming from you, Jessica. Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. It's just an absolute honor.
I'm so happy to talk to you. I want to start with your corporate era, and that's when we met. So you were a powerhouse VP in a company that was run by a C-suite of all white men. What was it like being a woman in that space?
There's a few things that really stand out as I look back at that time period. And the first one was honestly the imposter syndrome was massive. So it's not that I wasn't confident. I knew I was smart. I knew I worked hard. And yet I would be around that table and look and kind of think, how did I get here? Whose idea was this? And it's not something that anybody did or didn't do. It wasn't about anybody else. It was really coming from inside. And at the time, I would absolutely not have thought it had anything to do with being a woman. I just thought, oh, I should have more experience. I should have a better resume. I should have more training or something. And in retrospect, I now know how common that is for women, especially in those spaces. For men, sometimes, absolutely, but especially for women to feel that imposter syndrome in a power position like that. Um,
Absolutely.
so, so that was definitely one. The the other two, basically because of that, probably is I just put enormous amounts of pressure on myself. I felt this incredible sense of responsibility, not so much about growing my own career. That sort of happened as a consequence of doing other things, trying to do a good job, but really from the standpoint of feeling responsible for the company and especially all of the people that the company employed. And I felt like if I didn't do my job right, if I screwed up one, I had a bad week or something, that was real money that paid real people salaries, and people could get fired if I messed up too bad. So it was not that anybody was putting that pressure on me, but I was putting it on myself. And what that ended up meaning was the third part of that was the whole experience at the time, as surreal as it felt, also just felt like an exercise in survival day to day. It was not the, oh, wow, I've reached the pinnacle, as much as today I have to make sure that we bring in enough growth to pay people's salaries. And then the next day was, I need to find another way to bring that in. And so the whole experience was amazing and wonderful. And I would do it again in a heartbeat for those reasons. And um, it was tough, honestly.
Oh my gosh. I'm like stressing out listening to you talk about that because I remember you led with so much heart and I could tell how important this job was for you. And it wasn't about your success. And that wasn't my interpretation either. It was that you cared that the company did well, that the employees were taken care of, and that the members of our company got what they were paying for. That really came through. Did you feel that kind of pressure too, like from coming from the member base? I mean, we had, I don't even remember, over 1 million members or something, right?
Oh,
Like, did you feel pressure coming from them too, that you have to kind of deliver what they are paying for?
that was pressure, but honestly, that was also, in a way, it was just an honor as well, because that was prior to that job. I'd worked at agencies, and so marketing was sort of it was a theoretical exercise. Oh, advertise growth, it's in charts, that kind of stuff. But working for the company and going to events, for example, where I got to meet the customers and having them literally have tears and thank me for what this product was able to mean to them, that just felt like such a joy. And it wasn't marketing by spreadsheet, it was touching real human beings. And as much as anything, I felt the honor of being able to do that because the product was so truly meaningful for people.
Did you feel like you had to perform, like you had to keep growing, growing, and if you didn't, there would be repercussions?
Pretty much every day. True fact, the CEO of the company had a graph that was always playing on his laptop of the minute by minute subscriptions that came into the company.
I
And
forgot about that graph. I remember
minute
it.
by minute. And so if there was an unexpected dip at 11:52 in the morning, by 11:55 there was a phone call of what is going on. So yes, was I was I feeling chased all the time to make sure that we kept performing? Without a doubt.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I forgot about that graph. I'm having flashbacks. Okay. So, when we were prepping for this episode, you said, "You can say I got fired. It's fine. I'm at peace." And I said, "That's cool. But in my, from my perspective, that is not what happened. Here's what happened. You got pushed out of your role by a team of men who are intimidated by your intelligence and your creativity. That is my personal opinion, and this is my show, so that's what I'm saying. So, when you got pushed out by the patriarchy, what emotions came up from you, and how did you process that?
Absolutely. The first thing was hurt. You're right that I put my heart into the job. I think even at this moment, I can still feel the tears of that moment that I was told, thank you very much, we don't need you anymore. There were actual literal tears, and then the next thing I felt was this utter embarrassment that, like, what kind of professional am I that I'm crying in my boss's office right now?
Oh, I've done that too. It's all good.
There was an absolute grief because, and this will tell you what a creative I am at heart. I was, I lost that part of myself, but I also lost this incredible campaign that I had just spent 6 months building. And I swear to this day, I think it would have been one of the best TV campaigns of all time. And that got shelved as soon as I left. Um, but I was also honestly really mad at myself, not because thought I screwed up at work somehow. I was mad at myself because for at least the past year, I had known my head was on the chopping block. There had been an enormous amount of executive turnover that went along with the relatively natural process of going from a startup to a public company. I expected that to happen. I had just managed to forget that. I thought I could buy myself more time and be ready. And I was totally flat-footed. I was not ready. And that's what I was actually mad about. Not that I didn't feel like I belonged in the organization anymore. I knew that a startup needs scrappy, curious experimentation, and a public company needs consistent, predictable. It needs the things that are not my particular strengths. So I knew that would happen eventually. I just honestly, I wasn't ready for it in that moment. So that was definitely sad. But it was also one of the most helpful things that ever could have happened because it kicked me out of my what had, for all the survival mode, what had become my comfort zone, at least of an identity. This is who I am. And it let me step back out of that and look at who I wanted to be instead. So I will be forever grateful, actually, for being fired for that exact reason.
Yeah. And I find that so many times that's what actually ends up happening is we look back and we're grateful because we got a swift kick in the ass that we were not expecting, but it forced us, to your point, to be introspective and then make a choice about how we were going to go forward. Before we were choosing the hamster wheel because it was the devil that we knew, right? And it is a choice every day to get back on it. But then when you're forced to get off of it and actually take a look around and think about, well, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? It's the best gift. It's the best gift, especially when you take advantage of it, which you did. So let's talk about your next chapter. And sorry for the pun, but you went on to write a book, an amazing piece of historical fiction that I so adored. I had my book club read it. I gave it to my mom. She's an avid reader and a pretty tough critic, and she loved it. That says a lot right there. How did you know that that was going to be your next step?
Well, I'll surprise you maybe a little bit and tell you that the career was plan B.
Oh, tell me more.
Writing had always been plan A for me. I knew from the age of 7 that I wanted to write fiction specifically. And I went all the way through college and I got my English degree, not marketing, not business. And then I had rent to pay. and, and there was no clear step between I want to be a novelist and here's how I pay my rent with that. And so that's where the career really was my side gig to pay the bills while I was trying to work as much as possible on the writing. So that's really always been the authentic part of me, that I was trying to find a way to get back to essentially. And it never completely went away. I took a year off at one point and dedicated myself to writing, and I wrote a novel and then realized, like, okay, great, that one belongs under the bed, but at least I've written one. It still belongs under the bed. But it was part of the process. And I kept working with writers groups and I kept trying to keep all of this going. And once I had that beautiful gift of being fired and forced to relook at who I wanted to be, it gave me the opportunity to go back to that and say, I even went on some interviews and it just gave me the heebie jeebies. It was just like, nope, I'm done with plan B. It's time to put plan A in action. I'm not getting younger. If I'm going to do this, it's time to do it.
This doesn't surprise me that much because when we worked together, you used to close the door to your office and write. And you would write beautiful emails. And when you're in there writing the email marketing and you're the VP of marketing, but you were better at it than everybody else. So you're writing the copy for the campaigns and the emails. And it was always so beautifully written and so heartfelt and so personal. I was really impressed that you could do that because all of the copy I would try to write would be very like corporate-y sounding and you'd come out with this beautiful story. So it doesn't surprise me too much. And in fact, I'm thinking about this. So you were asking before we hit record about the podcast accelerator program I'm in. And the woman who runs that, used to be a songwriter and she wanted to get her own deal. She got a record deal and was like so excited and then got dropped. And then that happened again. And what she did was she found a way to still write music that wasn't the way that everybody thinks about or that everybody tries to go for. And she ended up writing music. She wrote jingles and songs for TV shows and commercials and made a wonderful living doing that. And it reminds me of what you did. You were a writer at heart. You became a VP of marketing, but you were still writing even in that role. But I love to see you step out and actually turn this into your focus. So what happened after you went on those funeral interviews and realized like, this is not what I want? Did you just buckle down and start writing? And did the novel just come out or what happened?
There was a really lovely in between period. I gave myself the opportunity to do some traveling. And you know how there's something about you get on an airplane and they close the door and it's like you leave your old life behind and it gives you perspective. I did that. I just happened to do it for 3 months, which was amazing. And it that did a couple of things. It filled me, I love to travel. So it filled me with just, wow, the world is an amazing place. So I was coming from a place of true positivity, not, oh man, what happened to me? That's unfair, or whatever. So there was this enormous positivity, and I was completely disassociated from my old life. And so that gave me the freedom to essentially recreate my identity. Like I said, I'd always wanted to be a writer. That space let me start seeing myself as one and think about how I wanted to really put that into action. And so instead of taking another job, I did freelance work on the side to help pay the bills, to give myself the opportunity and the freedom to really pursue the book that I was working on, the story that I felt like I really needed to tell.
Well, this story is so fascinating because you found someone in your own family tree with a really shady story. And you chose to tell this story. Can you tell us a little bit about who you discovered and why you felt the need to tell the story?
Absolutely. I had been thinking that I wanted to write some kind of historical fiction. It sounded interesting. I was kind of casting about for a topic, what to write about. And it was actually my mom who reminded me, well, you know, you had a great great grandfather who was a photographer in Gold Rush, San Francisco. He won a bunch of awards. He was well known. Maybe there's a story. And I thought, oh, that sounds cool. So I started looking up information about him, and I got all of those wonderful, oh, yay, he did this, and oh, yay, he did that. Like, I must be pretty cool if I'm related to him kind of feelings. And then one of the last things I did before closing the laptop, or I thought, was there was one other article that I clicked on that was this random, obscure law brief that connected him, and how interesting it was that he had this notorious serial killer brother. And I went, what? uh, who? What are we talking about? And so I was at home. It was dark outside by this point. I never even got up to turn on a light in the house. I was just working off the blue glow of the laptop, just diving into article after article as I started tracing this guy's family story. And I pulled him up on those like creepy serial killer fanboy sites. And it was
Ugh.
crazy. And what I discovered about him was he he wasn't maybe what you would expect of a serial killer. They called him the educated murderer, and it's because he was incredibly smart. He was a lawyer, he was a physician, he was a linguist who was fluent in 27 languages,
Whoa.
and he, killed people. And uh not just people, but his wife and his infant daughter, among many folks. And I remember shutting the laptop, basically shaking by that point and thinking, well, that's a story I'm never going to tell. I'm not going anywhere near that. But the story had other ideas, and it kept coming back to me. And I kept wondering, like, what does it mean about me to have this essentially psychopath in my family tree. And by the way, what genetics exactly get passed along? And it made me go back and rethink every like slightly mean thought I've ever had about anybody else in my life and think about it through this lens of, oh gosh, how evil am I? And so what I ultimately realized is the only way that I could come to terms with this ancestor was to figure out why. Why would somebody like that do something like that? And I read every biography that was available and all of the factual information, the nonfiction, and I got a lot of facts, but none of it got close to answering the inner soul aspect. And this was a terrifying thing for me to do, but what I realized I had to do to answer that question for myself was to write his story until I could answer for myself why somebody would do something like that. So the story went through something like 8 different drafts of me going in circles trying to figure out why he did this. And then literally there was the day I woke up and I put it together and I went, okay, there's my answer to the question. This hits my own internal button of truth. This is why I think he did that. So that then led to the me being able to fully tell a story.
What an incredible journey. And it feels like it's really emotional. Like you're going on an emotional journey to try to jump inside this person's body and understand them. That must have been kind of exhilarating and exhausting.
I would have never thought in a million years I would write a novel about a serial killer. I'm more of a, rainbows and unicorns kind of girl than a noir darkness kind of girl. Yeah, that wasn't the easiest thing to do. But it was also the most freeing. And it really let me put that in perspective.
Well, it's called The Prisoner's Apprentice. I will link to it in the show notes. I highly recommend it. I loved this book. It is so well written, so fascinating. And I remember everyone in my book club loved it. We read it a while ago. And one of the girls said, well, this just wasn't even enough. So as soon as she was done, she went on and Googled him and had to read all the information that you were talking about because she needed more. Who is this person? So anyway, congratulations on finishing that. It's really incredible.
Thank you.
I do want to talk about too a little bit the personal side of your life because we talked about this major change you made in your career, but you also had some pretty major changes in your personal life too that happened. So as you were standing on this new precipice, looking around, thinking, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? I remember you telling me you'd always been interested in sailing and you'd always wanted to learn more about that. And you, if I'm correct, you chose this time to join a sailing club and finally follow that passion. And that led to other things. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think I probably set myself up early on to be able to do these kind of pivots in part because I remember being in my early 20s and there were so many things I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to live this hipster life in San Francisco and I wanted to write in the woods and I wanted to sail away into the sunset and I wanted to do all these crazy things. And I was looking around thinking, I have to be reincarnated like 6 different times to do all of what I want to do. And then I thought, okay, well, I can't control that. But maybe I can live 3 or 4 different lives in the one that I'm given. And so it was kind of always in the back of my mind that there would be chapters, so to speak, in my life. And writing was one of the pieces that I wanted to address, and I absolutely did. One of the other ones was what I absolutely called a fantasy of sailing away into the sunset. And the reason that was a fantasy in my telling was I didn't know how to sail. I didn't really know anybody who sailed. I didn't even know if I liked sailing. It was just this idea, but it was this idea that wouldn't leave me alone. I hit this point and I thought, okay, either this is something that I just need to let go of. Like, once upon a time when I was 6, I wanted to be a ballerina. And okay, I was okay letting that dream go along the way. So is this like that? Like, do I just need to let go of this silly sailing thing? Or what would be the first step if I was going to explore that? Well, okay, I guess I should figure out if I like sailing. So that was the beginning. I never really thought that you could learn to sail. It was like you either were born into that kind of family that sailed or not. But what I learned really quickly in my very first sailing lesson was I love this. This is absolutely amazing. This bay has been in my backyard all this time, and I didn't know that this existed for me. So I was really overjoyed that I gave myself the chance to do that. And in the process of that very first sail, my instructor learned I was a writer. And I remember here I'm half shaking because I'm pushing myself well outside my comfort zone to be there, trying to keep this boat from tipping over or whatever it's going to do. And my instructor says, "Oh, you're a writer. I've got a story for you." And he proceeds to tell me about this woman who, in the mid 19th century, navigated a clipper ship around Cape Horn and set a record that lasted 135 years. And I thought, like, wow, that is a fascinating story. But I'm just trying not to jibe this sailboat and kill us all. So like, that's for another time. So I heard this amazing story. I kind of set it aside for the moment. And I was really focused on my own story at that point, my own adventure. So I discovered I loved sailing. I doubled down. I started taking every class I could and racing, and I got my captain's license. And as it happened in the process of that, I met someone who loved sailing as much as I did. And I was able to build this new and really beautiful relationship from a new standpoint for me, which was deciding that the one most important criteria to me was that they supported me in being my best self, whatever I decided that would be. And I'd I'd had other versions of that in the past. I'd had a relationship where my writing was considered selfish. I'd had a relationship where strong women were thought to be very supported and yay, go strong women. Oh, until, wait, you make more than I do? Not cool with that anymore. So I'd had the opposite scenario, and possibly, certainly with enormous luck, but also with the help of deciding what was truly important to me in a relationship, I was able to find this amazing person and set off on a sailing adventure that lasted for a couple of years. We sailed from San Francisco down to Mexico, and we were actually getting ready to cross the Pacific when COVID hit. So we came back to California and put that on pause for a while and worked on other things. Another pivot moment for me, I guess. Um, but it worked for me because I was finally following what my authentic self really wanted. And that led me certainly to writing, to sailing, and also to this relationship.
Oh, oh my God, I love that. And we hear it all the time. Be your authentic self and everything falls into place. But why is it so hard to be our authentic self?
Oh, that's that. Is there anything that takes more courage than that, really? When I was doing plan B of the corporate self, which was the pretend version of me, so to speak, I could stand up in front of 200 people and give a speech and not think twice about it. And that was not a problem at all. And then the first moment I went to go try to meet an editor in person related to writing my true authentic self, I practically peed my pants. He was more terrifying to me than anyone could have been. And I remember actually having to walk myself through this. You're going to go, it's like 4 blocks that you have to walk to go meet this guy. And you're just going to go 1 block. And if you get to the end of that 1 block and you need to turn around, you can turn around, but you're going to get to the end of that 1 block. And I had to walk myself through that one bit at a time, just to give you an example of one person's courage that, can do things that don't seem like themselves. That's easy enough. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, but the authentic self, that's what really requires the courage, at least in my case.
Oh, mine too. Nothing could be truer. Oh my gosh. And are you glad you took those steps?
I'm I'm so grateful that I took those steps. It was similar to the sailing. the only way that I could look at something that big and that overwhelming was a tiny little chunk at a time, and being really aware of where my comfort zone was and pushing up against it and being willing to push 10% past it or 20% past it, maybe 50 in the case of that guy. And he was fantastic. It had nothing to do with him. I had a wonderful conversation. You only grow with discomfort. And by pushing myself a little bit outside my comfort zone, this became super clear with sailing. Tacking a boat was hard. And then I got comfortable with that. And then jibing a boat, well, that was hard. And then, well, jibing it if it was gusting to 25 knots, that was hard. Oh, but then I got comfortable with that. The more I did it step by step, and then I'd look around and all of a sudden my comfort zone was bigger. And that was such a beautiful lesson for me that has allowed me to look forward at all of the things that are still outside of my comfort zone that I do want to engage in, and realize, okay, it's a set of steps. And, if you can walk to the end of that block and look around and see what you want to do next.
You've done it before. You can do it again. You have the confidence now. And I'm picturing this like almost like solar system where your entire life right now is outside of what your comfort zone used to be. How cool is that?
I'd
Look at
not thought of
you.
it that way, but
But look,
yes.
your entire life right now is way outside of your old comfort zone. And now the next planet is going to be the next comfort zone that you evolve into, that you travel to. I want to ask a quick question. You mentioned the story that your sailing instructor told you. Is that the story of your new novella?
Yeah. So that story that I thought, wow, yay her, whoever she was, and I set aside while I did my own adventures, came back to me big time when I came back to land and was sort of casting about again for what to do next. And my initial thought was, oh, well, if I write a story about her and sailing, it's, yay women, but also I get to be on the water again, at least in my mind. So that seems like a good subject. And once again, the story had much, much bigger ideas for me than I had for it, because what I realized uh, that I really wanted to understand in her story, again, beyond the facts of what she did, in her case, it was how, not just how did she have the confidence to push outside of what society allowed her to do at that period of time. Coming back to sort of a theme of what you've heard about me, how did she have the internal confidence to put herself forward, to not feel like an imposter? How did she have the confidence to push into areas that women were not accepted in a time where, like, the most common book for women had advice like, um, the display of learning in women is as unpalatable as the display of pedantry in a man, and
Oh,
that a woman's conversation was to be about nurturing space for other people. And how could she be somebody who led in a world like that and dealt with the fear that it would make her unliked, make her unlikable? This was very personally meaningful to me. And I realized, like, okay, that's an answer I need. And then I realized in her case, she not only did that, she did it. Her husband was the captain, which you would think, oh, that makes it easier. She gets to have a job. Not even close. What that means is she had to also find a way to be in a relationship with her boss, essentially, but with a man. She needed to be able to set the courses and the direction without emasculating him. She needed to find a way to balance this, allowing for her own brilliance without diminishing his. And she needed to do that in a way that set up this, what became a truly loving, lifelong relationship with him. And that was my wow. how did she do all those things? How do I do all those things? Right? Of course, is what I really want to take out of this. And so that has been absolutely pulling me into this story. I wrote the prequel to the series, which is The Navigator, which is out, and I am continuing to write the series, and it means that not only do I get to wake up every day and be on a tea ship in 1841, but that I get to keep asking this question until I come up with an answer for myself and hopefully other people. How was she able to find the courage, the balance, the factors that let everybody be their best self?
Wow. And what a cool journey for you to go on because there's so much self-work happening as you're discovering her story and then you're sharing it with all of us. You're sharing this inspiration from the 1800s that can help give us the confidence to make the right choices for ourselves, live our authentic life as best we can. Wow, how cool. Well, I'm excited. I know the novella is out, it's free. So I will link to that too in the show notes. I'm excited to read it and I'm excited for the series that's coming. I want to ask you just a couple questions to wrap up. So if you could go back and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would you tell?
I think the the most important thing would be what I've said about confidence, essentially. I haven't said it this way, but essentially confidence is a muscle and it can be strengthened like any other muscle. Confidence in any area. And so those steps of pushing outside a comfort zone and meeting with success, or pushing outside a comfort zone and meeting with failure, you're still alive. All of those things help strengthen that confidence muscle of, okay, I can do this. And what I never would have expected the the insecure young version of me would have the ability to do these things, to essentially to follow whatever things that I thought were pure fantasy in my life and turn them into actual dreams and then turn the dreams into actual reality. But it's just a set of steps.
Just a set of steps, one step at a time. What does your idea of success look like now? And has your definition of success changed over the years?
I thought for sure at one point that the most important thing to me was to win a Pulitzer and be a famous author. And somewhere along the line, I realized I actually could care less about that. That what was most important to me was the creative freedom to follow my curiosity and to answer these questions that came up for me through a vehicle that works for me, which happens to be writing fiction. That freedom essentially expands in other directions. Creative freedom, geographical freedom. I want to be able to travel and move. And all of that basically requires financial freedom, which is making v- quite large sacrifices in order to give myself the space that I don't have to feel like I'm on that hamster wheel. So I don't have a car. We sold our house in order to finance this boat so that I can be where I want to be and give myself the space to do what it is that's most important to me with what I have left of this amazing life.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's taking a look at your priority list and really putting it in order. And then the
Yeah.
choices become easier.
And it's no great surprise. It's the freedom that allows me to be my authentic self, essentially.
Yes. Yes. Okay. What one book do you think all midlife women should read?
You
Besides The
know, it's
Prisoner's Apprentice, which is amazing.
thank you. It's funny. You might expect I would give you a novel or at least a memoir or something like that and follow this amazing woman. And instead, I'm going to say something really funny, which is the book about Clifton Strengths, which is Strengths Finder. I think it's called 2.0. But this goes back to what I was saying is I think that people in general, women especially, really deserve to understand what their real strengths are. And instead of this way that we tend to focus on, oh, I wish I was more that, or why can't I be this, to be able to see what we really are and to fully lean into who that person is and our own actual real brilliance. I think everybody deserves that, especially women in midlife who absolutely have earned the right to see themselves as the incredible person that they actually are. So that's my book.
Figure out what your strengths are and then set yourself up for success.
Mhm.
All right, Cheyenne, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Where can everyone find you?
CheyenneRichards.com is a great starting place. That's Cheyenne spelled like the town in Wyoming, Cheyenne, and you can get to all the books and blog posts and future and everything else from there.
Great. We'll link that in the show notes too. Thanks so much. So great to
Thank you
chat with
so
you.
much, Jessica. It was just an absolute honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode got you thinking and fueled the fire that I know already lives within you. I would love so much if you would follow or subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on Apple or comment on Spotify. I'd love to hear what you think, and this will help more midlife women like you find this podcast and feel informed, connected, and badass. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with one friend who you think would enjoy it. And if you want to hang out with me between episodes, follow me on Instagram @belongwellness. See you next week.